I've worked as a plumber for over 10 years now. Most of the time, it's nothing but clogged drains, leaky faucets, or people flushing things they shouldn't. But there's one job I took last winter that still makes me sick to my stomach when I think about it. I tell myself I should have walked away the second I saw the place, but curiosity and a little too much pride kept me there. That was the mistake that nearly got me killed. It was a Wednesday night when I got the call. The dispatcher told me some guy had an emergency with his pipes. Said there was flooding in the basement, smelled like sewage. Normally I wouldn't take late calls, but this guy was willing to pay double for me to come out immediately. Money talks, and I was behind on my mortgage, so I grabbed my bag and went. The house was about 30 minutes outside of town, in one of those stretches where the houses get older, farther apart, and the streetlights are almost non-existent. When I pulled up, the place looked abandoned. Peeling paint, boarded windows on the second floor, and a front porch that sagged like it was rotting away. But the porch light was on, and I could see a figure pacing in front of the door, waiting. The man who greeted me was in his 40s, maybe, but looked much older. His hair was greasy, thinning, and his skin had this sallow tone like he hadn't been outside in years. His eyes never quite focused on me. They darted around like he was waiting for someone else to come out of the dark. "You the plumber?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep it professional. "You called about flooding in the basement?" He nodded quickly and ushered me inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Old wood, mildew, something metallic underneath. It was thick enough that it stuck to the back of my throat. The interior wasn't much better than the outside. Dim light bulbs hanging from cords, wallpaper curling off the walls, carpet so stained I couldn't tell the original color. "The basement?" he said, pointing down a narrow hallway. "It's bad, really bad." Normally, homeowners hover when I'm working, make small talk, ask how much it'll cost. Not this guy. He didn't follow me. He just stood by the door, scratching his arm raw, watching me disappear into the hall. Something about that unsettled me right away. The basement door was warped and swollen from moisture. I had to throw my shoulder into it to get it open. A wave of damp air hit me, mixed with something worse. Sewage, yes, but also rot. My flashlight beam swept down the narrow stairs, and I saw water pooled at the bottom. Dark, filthy water. I muttered a curse and started down, boots splashing when I reached the concrete floor. The water was ankle deep, filled with floating debris, soggy cardboard, unidentifiable lumps. The walls glistened with moisture, black mold spreading like veins. In the corner, the sump pump sat silent, submerged. I sloshed over, crouched down, and pulled it up to check. It was burned out completely. No wonder the basement was flooding. I turned to call up to the man, ask if he wanted me to replace it, but that's when I saw something that made my chest tighten. There was a door. Not unusual, I know. Basements have storage rooms, root cellars, that sort of thing. But this wasn't any normal basement door. It was metal, bolted into the concrete foundation, with heavy industrial hinges. The kind of thing you'd see in a bunker. It didn't match the rest of the house at all. And from the crack at the bottom, a slow trickle of water seeped out, spreading into the basement. That wasn't flood water. It was dark, thicker, and smelled foul in a way that made my stomach churn. I called up the stairs. "Hey, you got a locked room down here? Something's leaking through it." There was no answer, just silence. "Sir?" I tried again. The basement door at the top creaked, then slammed shut. I froze, flashlight beam shaking across the wet walls. My pulse thudded in my ears. I sloshed back to the stairs, grabbed the handle, and yanked. Locked. That was the moment I realized I wasn't down there to fix any plumbing problem. I banged on the door, shouting up, demanding he open it. No response. Only the muffled sound of footsteps retreating through the house. Then silence again. I forced myself to breathe, tried to think rationally. Worst case, I could smash the door off its hinges, but before I could even start, I heard a sound behind me. It was coming from that metal door in the basement wall. At first, just a faint dragging noise, like something heavy shifting across the floor on the other side. Then a low, wet cough. Something alive was in there. I don't scare easy, but every instinct in me screamed to get out. I pulled a wrench from my bag and used it to hammer at the basement door's lock, adrenaline giving me strength. After a few desperate hits, the old wood splintered, and I shoved through, tumbling into the hallway. The man was gone. The front door stood wide open, cold air spilling inside. I didn't wait. I bolted out, ran to my truck, and floored it out of there without looking back. But I didn't leave it alone. I should have, but I didn't. Curiosity eats at you. That night, I kept replaying what I'd seen: the door, the trickle of black water, the noises. By morning, I had convinced myself I needed to know what the hell was going on in that basement. I called a buddy of mine, another plumber named Rick, told him I needed backup on a sketchy job. Didn't tell him the details, just that I'd pay him double for his time. He agreed. We went back that afternoon. The house looked just as dead as the night before. No car in the driveway, no movement. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it was silent. Too silent. We called out, nothing. Rick gave me a look that said you dragged me into some weird shit, but he followed me down the hall anyway. The basement door hung from its busted frame where I'd forced it the night before. The air that seeped up was worse now, gagging us both. We tied bandanas over our noses and descended. The water had risen higher, up to our calves. The sump pump corner was the same, but the metal door, it was open. Just slightly, wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Rick swore under his breath. I shined my flashlight at the seam. The floor beyond was slick concrete, sloping downward. The black water trickled from there. "Hell no," Rick said. "This isn't plumbing. This is some Silence of the Lambs shit." He was right, but I couldn't stop myself. I pushed the door open further. The hinges groaned. The passage stretched down, longer than it had any right to. Bare concrete walls, dripping pipes overhead, the water getting deeper as it went. It wasn't just a storage room. It was a tunnel. We waited inside, both of us tense, every sound amplified in the echoing corridor. After maybe 30 feet, it opened into a larger chamber. My flashlight beam swept across the walls, and I felt my stomach twist. Chains bolted into the concrete, rusted but clearly used. Stained mattresses on the floor, soaked with water and darker patches I didn't want to identify. A folding table with restraints, and a bucket filled with things I won't describe in detail, but the smell confirmed they'd once been part of people. Rick gagged, turned toward the tunnel. "We're done. We're calling the cops right now." Then we heard it. A splash, deeper in the chamber, something moving in the shadows. My flashlight caught the briefest glimpse of pale skin, thin limbs scrambling back into the dark. Not the man from upstairs. Something else. Someone else. They'd been kept down there, and they were still alive. Rick started backing out, fast. I followed, flashlight fixed on the dark corner. That's when we both heard the voice. A rasp, broken but clear. "Don't leave me." It came from the shadows, from whoever, whatever was chained back there. Rick shook his head violently. "We're going. Now." We stumbled back through the tunnel, into the basement. As we did, we heard another sound behind us, the screech of metal on concrete, the chain being dragged. They were moving. We didn't wait to see how fast. We sprinted through the flooded basement, up the stairs, and out into daylight. Rick pulled his phone the second we hit the driveway and called the cops. It took them 20 minutes to show. We waited by my truck the entire time. Neither of us speaking, just watching the open front door of the house like something was going to come crawling out. When the cops finally went in, they were down there for less than 5 minutes before one came back up, pale-faced, radioing for backup. Within the hour, the place was crawling with uniforms, crime scene vans, floodlights. They didn't tell us much, but I overheard enough. There were multiple bodies in that tunnel, some recent, some not, and there were survivors. Barely human by the time they were pulled out, but breathing. As for the man who called me, gone. They never found him. Last fall, I picked up a late-day appointment from a woman in her 30s. She sounded frantic on the phone. Said her toilet and sink weren't draining at all, and water was backing up into her bathtub. I could hear kids screaming in the background, and she was nearly in tears, begging me to come that night. I pulled up around 7 p.m., just before dark. The neighborhood wasn't bad. Row houses from the 1950s, all lined up neatly, but her place stood out. The lawn was overgrown and the paint was peeling. Toys littered the yard like the kids had dropped them mid-play and never came back. She answered the door immediately, 2 kids clinging to her legs. She looked exhausted, hair tied back, shadows under her eyes. She apologized for the mess as she let me in. The place was cluttered, sure, but what caught me was the smell. A faint stench of sewage, sour and heavy, that grew stronger as I walked inside. "The drains stopped yesterday," she said quickly, ushering me toward the bathroom. "Then this morning, the toilet overflowed. It's getting worse. Please, just fix it. I can't take much more." The bathroom was a disaster. The tub was full of standing water, gray and reeking. The toilet bowl was nearly to the brim, and the sink was the same. It all pointed to a mainline clog. Not fun, but I'd handled dozens like it. "Where's the access to the main cleanout?" I asked. She looked embarrassed. "In the basement. It's a mess down there. I don't go down anymore. My husband used to handle it, but he's not here." She trailed off, avoiding eye contact. I didn't press. People split up. People die. Not my business. I just needed to get to the cleanout. The basement door was stiff, and when I opened it, a damp draft hit me. The smell of sewage grew stronger instantly. I clicked on my flashlight and started down the creaky wooden steps. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, and shelves piled with junk. The mainline cleanout was across the room. But what I noticed first was the water. It covered the floor, maybe an inch deep, rippling faintly as I stepped into it. Dark, murky water with things floating in it, bits of trash, dirt, but also hair. Long strands that tangled around my boots as I waded forward. The cleanout cap was against the far wall. I crouched, wrench in hand, and started working it loose. As I did, I heard something. A drip. Then another. Then a faint sloshing from the far end of the basement. I turned my light. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows. The wall on the far side looked wrong. The concrete was damp, streaked black, but there was also a dark gap near the floor. A hole. I walked closer, water splashing softly. The hole was jagged, maybe 2 feet across, like the concrete had crumbled inward. Behind it, nothing but blackness. And as I shined my flashlight into it, the beam caught water. More standing water, stretching into what looked like a tunnel. That's not normal. Houses don't just have tunnels under them. A noise came from inside. Not dripping this time. Movement. Something shifted in the dark water, just beyond the edge of my flashlight's reach. I froze. My heart thudded, and I forced myself to back away, slow, pretending like nothing was wrong. I went back to the cleanout, unscrewed it, and water gushed out, brown and foul. I almost gagged, but I held my ground, got my auger, and started feeding it into the pipe. The whole time, I couldn't stop glancing at that hole. Something was in there. I was sure of it. After a few minutes, the blockage gave way. I heard the water upstairs start to drain. I screwed the cleanout shut again, wiped my hands on a rag, and got the hell out of the basement. The woman was waiting at the top of the stairs, wringing her hands. "All fixed," I said. "You should be good now." She looked relieved, almost to the point of tears. I gave her the invoice. She paid in cash, and I left. I should have put it out of my mind, but I couldn't. That night, I kept thinking about the hole, the water, the movement. I told myself it was probably a collapsed drain line or groundwater seeping in, but I'd been in enough basements to know better. That was a tunnel, and there was something in it. 2 days later, the woman called again. Same problem. Drains backing up, water rising in the bathroom. She begged me to come back. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, she looked worse than before. Pale, hollow-eyed, jumpy. The kids weren't clinging this time. They weren't there at all. "Where are your kids?" I asked casually as I set down my bag. She stiffened. "At their father's." Her voice was flat, unconvincing. The bathroom was worse than before. The tub wasn't just full. It was filled with black water, surface broken with strands of hair, bits of tissue. The toilet overflowed onto the floor. The smell was unbearable. I headed back down to the basement. This time, the water was deeper, ankle high. The hole in the wall was bigger too. Crumbled concrete scattered the floor, and the dark space behind it yawned wider, like something had pushed from the other side. I crouched again at the cleanout, wrench in hand. But my eyes kept drifting to the hole, and then I heard it. A voice, faint, echoing from deep in the tunnel, high-pitched, childlike. Mommy. Every hair on my body stood up. The sound of splashing followed, something moving through the water in there, coming closer. I dropped the wrench and stumbled back. My flashlight beam shook as I aimed it into the tunnel. For a split second, I saw something. A pale face, just under the water, eyes open, hair floating around it, watching me. I bolted up the stairs. The woman was waiting, wringing her hands, eyes wide. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. I stopped cold. "What the hell is down there?" Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head violently. "Don't ask me. Don't say anything. Just leave. Please." I left. I should have called the cops right then, but something about the way she looked, the terror in her eyes, made me keep my mouth shut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that pale face under the water, hearing that voice. The next day, I drove by the house. The shades were drawn, no sign of the woman. But in the driveway, scattered near the side door, were small plastic toys, ones I hadn't seen before, ones that looked freshly dropped. I called the non-emergency police line, told them there was something dangerous under that house, that they needed to check it out. They brushed me off, said drainage issues were a city works problem, not police. A week passed, then two. I tried to move on, but last month I got another call. Different house, different street, another basement flooding. And when I got down there, I found it again. A hole in the wall, jagged concrete, dark water trickling out, and from the darkness, faint splashing. I've been plumbing for 15 years, and I've seen some nasty shit, literally. Toilets clogged with diapers, drains choked with grease, sump pumps full of things I can't even identify. I thought I'd seen it all, but last spring, I took a job that I still can't stop thinking about, not because of what was in the pipes, but because of who was in the house. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was about ready to call it quits when the dispatcher rang me up. Said there was a man with serious drainage issues, sounded desperate. I didn't want to take another job that late, but the guy offered to pay cash, extra if I came immediately. That's how they get you. The house was out in a rural stretch, 20 minutes off the highway. One of those isolated two-story homes surrounded by woods. When I pulled up, the driveway gravel crunched under my tires, and the house loomed over me. No kids' bikes, no flower beds, just an empty porch and drawn curtains. The man who answered the door was in his 50s, maybe, but hard to pin down. His hair was messy, his clothes looked like he'd thrown them on in a rush, and his eyes, bloodshot, unblinking, just lingered too long. "You the plumber? You the plumber?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "What's going on?" "Basement bathroom's backed up. Nothing drains. Been getting worse all week." His voice was flat, like he'd rehearsed the lines. He led me through the house. Inside wasn't much better than outside. Bare walls, minimal furniture, no family photos, nothing that made the place feel lived in. Just a house, empty of personality. The smell hit me before we even reached the basement. Sharp, sour, rotten, stronger than the usual sewage stink. The basement was unfinished concrete, dim light bulbs dangling on cords. The bathroom was in the far corner, just a toilet and sink shoved into a little room. Both were filled to the brim with dark water, the surface broken by floating things. At first, I thought it was just paper waste. But when I leaned closer, my stomach turned. They weren't paper. They were little chunks of something pale, wet, fibrous, bits of flesh, swollen and bobbing in the water. I pulled back, covering my nose with my sleeve. "What the hell have you been flushing down here?" The man didn't answer. He just stood behind me, arms crossed, watching me too closely. "Look," I said, trying to keep it professional. "I've seen people flush all kinds of stuff, but this is something else. This looks like tissue. Meat. If someone's been putting stuff like this down the pipes, it's gonna clog everything. It's not built for that." That was when his expression changed. Not anger, not embarrassment, just stillness. His eyes dropped to the floor, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he looked back up, and there was no confusion in his face. No denial, just decision. Before I could process it, he left the room. I thought he'd gone to get his wallet maybe, but when he came back, he wasn't holding cash. He was holding a gun. "Turn around," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. My first instinct was to bolt, but the look in his eyes froze me. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't confused. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Hands up," he ordered, back toward the stairs. I did what he said. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but that barrel followed every move I made. He marched me up the basement stairs, through the empty house, out the front door. His van was parked beside mine in the driveway, an old rusted thing with no windows in the back. "Get in," he said. My legs wouldn't work. Look, man, whatever this is, get in. His voice cracked, louder this time. He jammed the gun against my back. I climbed into the van, heart hammering. The inside reeked of metal and oil. The walls were scuffed, the floor stained. No seats, just bare metal and tie-downs. He slammed the door, locked it, then walked around to the driver's seat. The van roared to life, gravel spraying as he pulled onto the road. In the dark back, every bump and turn threw me against the metal walls. My brain was spinning, trying to figure out what he planned to do. Why me? Why now? I kept thinking about the chunks in the pipes. Flesh. Real flesh. And I realized he thought I knew too much. The ride felt endless. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to stay quiet. Maybe if I didn't piss him off, I'd get a chance to run when he stopped. Then the engine growled louder, the van shuddering as he pressed the gas. We were flying down the country road, taking turns too fast, the tires squealing. And that's when I heard it, the wail of a siren. Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks around the back doors. A cop. I'd never been so relieved in my life. The van swerved, speed picking up, but the siren grew closer. I heard the cop's loudspeaker barking. Pull over, now! For a terrifying minute, I thought he wouldn't stop, that he'd rather shoot it out than get caught. But then the van slowed, tires crunching on gravel as it pulled onto the shoulder. The engine cut. Silence, except for my pounding heartbeat. I heard the driver's door creak open, the man's voice loud, tense. Evening, officer. I couldn't hear the cop's reply, just the low murmur of conversation. Then, suddenly, the slam of metal on metal, shouting, boots scuffling on gravel. Hands where I can see them. Get down. Don't move. Another slam, a grunt, then silence. A second later, the back doors of the van flew open. Blinding flashlight beams cut through the dark, and a cop's voice barked. Hands up! Now! I scrambled forward, hands raised, babbling that I was the plumber, that I'd been taken at gunpoint. They pulled me out, cuffed me just to be safe, and sat me on the gravel. Another officer wrestled the man to the ground, pinning him while reading his rights. The cop who'd pulled me out asked a few sharp questions, then finally removed the cuffs. My wrists burned, but I didn't care. I was out. I was alive. They searched the van while I sat on the shoulder, shaking. I didn't see what they found, but I caught the expressions on the cops' faces when they opened the back compartments. Disgust. Shock. One of them gagged. Later, I'd hear through the grapevine what was in there. Plastic tubs, tarps, stained tools, things that explained the flesh in the pipes. The man had been getting rid of bodies through his own plumbing, flushing pieces, bit by bit, until the system couldn't take it anymore. And when I saw it, when I named it for what it was, he knew he couldn't let me leave. They told me I was lucky. If he hadn't sped, if the cop hadn't been running radar on that stretch, if any one thing had gone differently, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. I try not to think about it too much. Try not to picture the chunks bobbing in the toilet water or the look on his face when I asked what they were. But every time I get a call about a clogged pipe, every time I pull something unrecognizable from a drain, I remember, and I wonder how many plumbers have stumbled across things they weren't supposed to see and didn't get as lucky as I did.